Hi, I'm Ali Patterson, and welcome to the Paytech Show. In a world of ever-changing technologies and banking competitors, why are some banks still not digitizing? It's getting to a point where if you don't get your house in order, your bank is going to be entirely irrelevant. Is your bank too big to fail? Joining me in the studio, we have a number of forward-thinking organizations that are leading the way when it comes to digitizing the services for their customers, but also their employees at the back end. Over in Denmark, we catch up with Banking Circle Soren, an organization that has just got their banking license over in Luxembourg. Next up, we call up on an exciting European challenger bank, Lunar, to hear about how they're able to reach for the stars with a cloud-based digital back-end system. And then continuing our Scandinavian tour, we head over to Sweden to catch up with a more traditional bank. We speak with SEB's Paula de Silva. Banking Circle's recent research looks at banks and their approach when it comes to digital. What are some of the factors driving banks' digitalization plans, and has the current climate impacted the speed of adoption, both in terms of accelerating or even slowing it down maybe?
Right. Well, certainly we do see that increased rate of adoption. And first of all, that is because customers are calling for it. And that is why we see banks becoming more flexible and more responsive on the digital agenda. Of course, that has also been encouraged and helped on its way by regulatory initiatives such as the PSD2. I think now what we're seeing is that the COVID-19 circumstances are just making it more important for the banks to follow this agenda. Banks just don't get their customers coming in through the door to the same extent anymore, and the importance of the digital channels have just increased.
With that in mind, do you think it's something that is accelerating current plans, or do you think banks are almost having to create plans from scratch?
So I think very much it's the former, an acceleration of current plans. Banks are big, established, thoughtful institutions that are planning for the long term. I myself have spent 3 years working at a Nordic Universal Bank, and before that advised banks across Europe. And I've learned how banks plan for the longer term. And I think most bank executive management groups sit down now and find that the plans they had are actually good plans. However, they need to accelerate both the front-end digitalization and the back-end automation to be able to cope with current circumstances.
I just want to expand a little bit around the regulatory part that you mentioned there. You mentioned PSD2 as a driver for regulation. Can we just expand a little bit around that, of whether it's the actual regulation itself that's driving some of the digital change, or whether it's almost the spirit of the regulation, the opportunities that it presents from having these open APIs?
Well, I think it's very much both, Ali. I think it's a combination, because I think it has been necessary with a regulatory push to really open up and to really give access to information that's relevant. But I also do think that there's a countless number of seminars and discussions on the open banking in general. And I think what we find is that when something like this proliferates in the sector's participants will also find its natural, in its natural agenda to open more up and to include third parties to an increased extent.
It turns out that if you don't get your data straight, if you don't get your processes straight, there is no way we can deliver good value to our customers, neither good interfaces for them to act on. That's the problem. So you have to get your house in order in the back in order to be really good at the front. That's why it matters.
So why do you think, typically speaking, a lot of banks tend to have, almost neglected the back office systems, the elements that the customers aren't really seeing? Why does that tend to almost be kind of pushed to one side?
I mean, things have changed over the years, but if you look at the back office in the past, it was all manual, right? So you only needed people that were very dedicated to their processes, and therefore you could invest in the front, good people in the front towards the customers, and then eventually systems. You went from going into branch offices to digitalizing that single process. Not a better interface, but the same, only on an app or online. That's really how it happened. So the investment was seen as you have to give customers a good value in the front. But it turns out that you can do that as much much as you want, but if you actually can't identify the customer they come in, or you don't have a good know your customer process, then that process tended to be so long. So the customer experience was so bad. So whenever you became a customer, you already had a pretty bad experience of the bank. That's what we are obviously fixing now. Also, to buy a product, there is not a lot of products a company can buy online today from banks. They have to still do things very manual. So when you get the insight of the end-to-end of a customer process, then you understand that the back is really the cumbersome part, or the one that also will make a bigger impact. The front is easier. There are people that can do that in a really fancy, easy way. Or like when I was young working in banking, you took the payment order and you put that in a protectograph, as it was called, a machine that says this is a payment. Then you sent it by post. Of course, that is not needed then to invest much in. You just need more people as you scaled. That's not really, when the customer asked, where is my payment? It was difficult to answer that. But often that was not required. You accepted that it took two weeks for it to reach whatever country and for it to enter your account another week. That was okay. Now you want it like this. Pretty different.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, payments are data. That's effectively what a payment is. It's obviously a secure piece of information. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but banks have quite a bit of data.
Really? Yes, of course. You want us to be secure. You don't want anyone else to interfere with your money. So we are pretty detailed and we are pretty trustworthy. And to be trustworthy, you need to know who you're touching, what kind of products you're offering, and have that in order. That's why back office and data is so important.
It was a decade, 2 decades ago, where everything was done end-of-day batch process, and now everyone demands everything in real time. So what has that led to the bank to adapt to enact?
When things are connected, as we are all the time, we cannot be the hinder for that to happen. The banking industry cannot be the hinder for Internet of Things to actually being adopted, because a lot of that requires a payment. So again, the transfer of data, we know how to do that. Then we have to transfer the title. And we can do that. I mean, in the Nordics, we've chosen to do that through P27 that you might have heard about. Instead of having domestic clearing systems, we will have Nordic ones across the countries and across the currencies up here. And that will, of course, facilitate to not have to invest all of us in 4 different countries, in God knows how many systems and so forth. But we actually only things that need to be resilient, transparent, and those things that need to be really secure. Also for the national for national security, if you want, we can collaborate around that instead of every bank having to invest separately. So that's one way of getting together and use our combined investment strength to make sure that we have something that is good for the community.
So, and you're on the board for P27?
Yes, I am the chairman since 1.5 years back, but we will eventually have an independent chairman according to the rules and regulations of the shareholders agreement. But meanwhile, I've been facilitating the setup of the company. Yep, it's really fun actually. I need to tell the grandchildren, only that they won't know what the payment is because it's all going to be embedded in what you do. So I potentially lose my edge there.
How are banks using customer data to start to determine what customers demand and what customers want?
I think this comes back to the way that we've seen for the last 10 years and more to become more agile in development. Working agile basically means, in my view, one thing, and that is to listen to the customer and develop propositions based on the customer needs. And the only way you can do that effectively is by collecting customer data and learning from it. So I think that the customer data collection and application and development goes very well hand in hand with the agile development ways of working that we've seen for the past many years.
Adapting to an increasingly technology-driven landscape while also becoming more future-proof is one of the most urgent priorities for banks today. While these challenges look very different to some of the financial crises of the past, are there any learnings that can be applied today from previous financial crises?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of learnings, and I think one thing we should say about big banks is that they have gone through economic cycles. They have been through everything you can almost imagine. A global pandemic will certainly be a new one to add, but I think the crisis management tools that you would apply in such situations will be at least partially inspired by what has been previously applied.
How would you describe a bank's sort of previous architecture in terms of their technology stack?
Right. I mean, previously what we've seen, not only in banking but in general, is that the IT has been developed in a waterfall approach, and that has had implications for how the technology stack then ends up being. Obviously, that has changed within the past years, and we're now seeing a more thoughtful, I would say, or maybe a better word, more agile structure of the IT stack that is better suited for the infrastructural challenges that we see now.
We got to talk a little bit about the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns around the world. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that being cloud native and a bank that's truly cloud native, that's been quite advantageous for you during the lockdown, the fact that everyone can work remotely and be working on the same projects?
Yeah, I think, there is two things that I think has helped us through the whole COVID-19 period, and we are still in it. Just the fact that we are on different locations has meant that we from day one has just used Skype call, video call, etc. as an everyday thing. But that was primarily from the offices, and then from Aarhus to Copenhagen to Oslo to Stockholm, etc. So that we have actually done since the beginning, more or less. But I think what was interesting to see that from when here in Denmark, when we closed down, that was in back in, was it March? Yeah, this year, March, April, and we had everyone sent home, and now everyone working from home. We had all our colleagues up and running without any problems within 24 hours. So the transformation from being on site to just working from remote was like, okay, we did that, just moving on, now just talking projects, development, future from the next day, so to speak. So it has been extremely easy for us to do that conversion. It was also easy to come back to the offices as well. And we know that from some of our partners who we collaborate with, some of the larger incumbents companies who provide some critical financial infrastructure into the clearing systems, etc., they really struggled with this. They really did. So it's not just a coordination. It was also giving people access to the right systems because they had never built it to work based on remote. It was always built to be on premise. So it was interesting to see how easy it actually was for us. I don't think we actually paid that much attention to it. It's only once people have started asking about it, actually, we.
What's been your approach to this when it comes to the cloud and cloud technologies?
Well, we wish to be a cloud from the get-go kind of company. We are bringing all our hosting onto the cloud and want to make sure that we have our data stored well in the cloud, allowing for our technological tools that we need to deploy onto that.
If we want to hire the best people out there right now, we need to be in this space. We need to be working be cloud natives from the very beginning, because that's where all the best people out of university, that's the field that they are the experts within. So if we are not, really adapting into the cutting edge technology, we're not gonna have the cutting edge people on our side. So that's one element. And I think that we as a new company and as a younger company has had the opportunity to actually attract these great talent from the universities, simply because we were building from a blank piece of paper and we're using the best technologies from the very beginning. And it can sound a bit nerdy, but at the end of the day, that's the core foundation of our existence. So it's quite important, And then that's just from an inside out perspective. So another element is our ability to collaborate with other companies as well. We can just see that whenever we are integrating and doing collaboration with other fintech companies, etc., having built and started up in the same cloud native approach as we did, we can do the integration by 3 weeks. We can do the integration by 2 months. That's it, and then we are just up and running. It's so easy for us to do those collaborations, and I think that's where a main advantage compared to the incumbents is that since we have this new technology, and since many of the incumbents are also right now, talking very much about, it's not the incumbents versus the fintech, and we're not saying that either. It's so much about collaboration. Then it's going to be a competitive advantage who are actually able to bring products to the market in a faster pace when you're talking about collaboration. And just having that core as we do, I think we have a very cutting edge competitive advantage compared to the incumbents in that way.
Looking forward, what strategies are you seeing banks use to keep up with digitisation, and to what extent do you think they're hindered by our old friend, the legacy systems?
Yeah, so legacy systems is a big agenda and a big issue, right? We can look at how a Nordic bank, Nordea, has been writing off a 5 billion DKK project to integrate their different platforms. And that's just because this was a difficult and almost uncomprehendable thing to manage. And we see that many multinational banks with coverage on even wider set of agendas will have an even more complex legacy platform to work from. Because the fact of the matter is that it's not only a legacy thing, it's also the degree of the platform fragmentation. The fact that there are so many different data platforms in one bank with so many different field entries and so many different structures, that just makes it difficult to really create innovative solutions on top of it. That in turn leads banks to having to focus more on what the long-term priorities are, and indeed so to work out where to collect insights or even third-party propositions from specialized providers.
What do you think is some of the cause behind this? Is it the way that banks? There's been a lot of consolidation over the last few decades of banks, and a lot of the time they try and almost keep both systems running at the same time. What's some of the root cause behind some of this legacy silo?
Well, I just think banking is a very old industry, and many of the banks we see today have been built on platforms that are decades, if not centuries, almost old, and that's real legacy, and that's just causing the challenges. And it sounds easy just to go back and then clean it up and fix it and consolidate it, but the fact of the matter is that's just very, very difficult. And that's why banks then try different solutions, everything from screen scraping to focusing on a few selected platforms when developing solutions and ideas is being applied. But really, when it comes to the end of the day, as I said, it just goes back to the point that you have to focus your efforts. You have to really, zoom in on what is important.
So your research points to an overwhelming recognition that the customers, they value the user experience more than the actual institution's stability. What are the challenges, but also equally the opportunities that this presents to the incumbent banks?
I think what we're learning is that customer demands have been important to banks, they remain important to banks, and they will in the future be important to banks. Banks will, as such, have to continue and potentially even increasingly take note of customer demands and build that into their solutions. And what is intriguing and interesting is indeed that customer demands are changing. A global pandemic has really led to changed customer needs, changed customer situations, and every bank will need to be empathetic towards that. Customers now sit in their homes They ask for bread machines and other products to a completely new extent. And we see customers asking for smooth, seamless, strong solutions that can make a stressful everyday in their home apartments and houses feel better. So that means that that banks will need to deliver products that are more easy, more digital, and more compelling to the customers going forward. So as part of delivering those more seamless, more smooth customer propositions, the back end of the bank's operating systems have to be as strong, as efficient as possible. And that's where Banking Circle comes in. We are able to deliver that stronger, more smooth back end part of the business, and accordingly allow banks to deliver better propositions for their customers.
What does it mean for you in terms of your customer journey from the moment that someone decides they want to onboard with you? Just talk me through that process and where the cloud fits into all of this from start to finish.
Well, it fits just perfect because, I mean, being a cloud native, so we are onboarding all our clients digitally right now. So we only have onboarding digital processes in line. That's both for the private customers and the business customers as well. So we only do online boarding. And by doing that, we need to do a lot of different integrations and a lot of different checks in order to make sure that the customers are actually who they are, the whole KYC process. Being in an online and digital universe here and based on the cloud, etc., we're just able to do these integrations and make sure that it's in real time, whatever we're doing. So that has been a very significant thing for us to make sure that we were able to do that. Also, so now we have the customer onboarded. Now we are about to create the account. We are about to also issue the card as well. Being able again to do fast integrations and do real-time information flows, we are able to create the account instantly. So not only are we able to onboard the customer, and once we have done the check there, we are able to create the account just instantly. We are able to issue the card virtually instantly. We are able for the customers to choose their own PIN instantly, etc. So there are so many, touch points from the customer's perspective that, you're not able to do that, so to speak, in the old environment. These are being done possible because we have built it on new technology.
Well, that's all we've got time for on today's episode of the Paytech Show. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about how these banks and organisations are changing the way they operate. Thank you to all our panellists for giving their forward-thinking thoughts. Don't let your bank get left behind, the race is heating up. Thanks for watching, bye for now.